Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. This week, members of a Pakistani family were in Washington to tell Congress what it's like to be victims of a drone strike. Only 4 lawmakers showed up. And recently, a UN report and investigation by human rights groups make it abundantly clear Obama's drone policies may constitute war crimes under international law. The White House dismisses these claims. It would appear Washington reserves the exceptional right to murder with impunity. To CrossTalk Washington's drone policies, I'm joined by Medea Benjamin in Washington. She is a co-founder of Code Pink and author of Drone Warfare. Also in Washington, we have Morris Davis. He is a professor at the Howard University School of Law. And in New York, we cross to Pir Zubair Shah. He is a journalist and a former fellow of the Council on Foreign Relations. All right, CrossTalk rules in effect. It means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much encourage it. Medea, if I can go to you first in Washington, before we talk about the legality and strategic elements and moral elements of the drone policy, I'd like you to reflect upon the fact that only 4 lawmakers listened to that Pakistani family that made it all the way to Washington, who lost a loved one in a drone attack. Is official Washington just doesn't care?
Oh, definitely. I don't think official Washington cares very much. If they did, they would have done something over all these years that we've been using drones to try to get to the bottom of it. They haven't demanded that the legal justification for drones be made public. They haven't demanded that secondary strikes where people are killed just on the basis of suspicious behavior be stopped. They haven't demanded apologies or compensation for the innocent victims. So they've been missing for years, not just at this hearing.
Morris, how do you reflect upon that? Because I watched the testimony. It was quite moving. Do you think it's going to impact at all the way the Obama administration applies this policy? Because it's shrouded in mystery still, and there's no recourse, and they don't seem to want to answer any serious questions or investigations that have been made recently that come from what most people would say reliable sources and organizations.
Yeah, I wish I could say that I had some optimism that it would have an impact, but my experience has been over the 4+ years of the Obama administration that I'm disappointed more often than I'm pleased. So I can't say that I expect any change. And it's regrettable because this administration and the drone policy is really setting the precedent for other countries and how this evolution of warfare will continue to develop. And I think we're setting a very bad precedent.
Well, Pierre, it looks like to me in New York here, it looks like the Obama administration is just impervious to any kind of investigation. I mean, Human Rights Watch and other organizations, by any definition of international law, these are war crimes. And they are just impervious to, these claims here. These are very serious claims that are being made.
Yes, but here we have to look into the basically the politics surrounding the drone war in Pakistan. The problem with the drone war is, like in Pakistan and with the US, it's the problem of politics and it's the problem of transparency. No one knows what's the nature of Pakistan-US relationship and what has been the agreements made in order for the US to be allowed to conduct these drone strikes within Pakistan. So this is one thing. The other is the inaccessibility of the area. You cannot really go there and investigate. So any information coming out of the tribal areas is very much unconfirmed, and
well, Pierre,
it takes time.
I agree with you. This is one of the rationales that are used, that these are very distant places, no man's land, as it's called. But this Pakistani family went to Washington, D.C. I mean, does that mean anything? Does it count for anything that their mother was murdered by a drone, and there's no accountability whatsoever? It just, as Medea said in the beginning of the program, no explanation, no compensation. I mean, what else do the people have to do to get the word out?
Yeah, I mean, you are right, but the thing is that Pakistan is complicit in these attacks, and Pakistan should be held responsible. First of all, to tell to its people what's the nature of its relationship with the US, whether it has allowed the US to conduct these attacks or not. And also, Pakistan has to then compensate those families, and it is a very clear-cut case of civilian casualty. That's why the family came out. And there has been very few of these cases in which families have been given access to the international media and also have been allowed to visit the US. So the thing is that you have to take into the account the politics, as I said. The U.S., the problem here is that the program was acknowledged very late, and there is no transparency, and it's classified basically. Similarly, we don't know. Now President Musharraf tells us that we had an agreement with the U.S. to conduct these attacks. Similarly, there has been other reports in which the Pakistanis are telling us that, yes, there was some sort of understanding to conduct these attacks. So the point is that you have to take Pakistan also accountable in all these things.
I would agree with you. I agree with you, but Medea, if I can go back to you, under international law, and this is my point of view all the time, international law, the United States is not in a conflict, official conflict in Pakistan. Ergo, these attacks are illegal under international law. If the United States said, yes, we're in a military conflict in with the state of Pakistan, then there's a little bit of wiggle room there. But still, they deny the obvious.
Well, that's right. What they're saying is that the United States is at a war with al-Qaeda and its associated forces, which gives, according to the U.S. government, carte blanche to go in anywhere. But as Colonel Morris Davis said, this is a terrible precedent that we're setting for the rest of the world. And no matter what kind of arrangement was made with the Pakistani government earlier on, it certainly has not been made with the present government. And Ben Emerson, the UN rapporteur, said that even if the military of Pakistan made an agreement with the United States, the military is not the elected government. We have to go by what the elected government says, which says stop the drone strikes. But I would agree with Pierre, there is certainly a responsibility for the Pakistani government as well. Somebody should acknowledge these strikes. Somebody should compensate the families. And it is good that the Pakistani government finally went to the United Nations to denounce drone strikes just recently.
Morris, imminent danger. And
Peter,
go ahead, jump in, please do. This is CrossTalk.
Yeah, if I could, I think one misnomer I'd like to clear up is we've talked about the drone program, and they're actually drone programs, plural, because we have two separate programs. We have one operated by the military that ostensibly should comply with the law of war, which Medea just mentioned that crossing into Pakistan and whether we're at war there is a problematic question. But we have that military program that should operate within the law of war. And then we've created another paramilitary program operated by the CIA, which is a civilian agency. I mean, they have the same status under the law of war as arming the Postal Service or the Library of Congress. To go into another country with a civilian agency to kill people. They don't have combatant immunity that applied to the military. And to me, that CIA program is the extraordinarily problematic legal problem here.
Well, Pierre, if I can go to you in New York, that's exactly true, because if you do officially call it a conflict, then the rules of law, the rules of war apply, and humanitarian laws apply as well. This is exactly what the administration and officials in Pakistan want to avoid. Just keep shrouding it in mystery.
Exactly, and as I said, the problem is the access given to anybody in the tribal area. So tribal areas, especially North and South Waziristan, they're like a complete black hole where no one knows what's going on, and things come up when there is a clear case of civilian casualties, as we saw in the case of Rafiqur Rahman, where his grandmother was killed. So, I mean, this is basically, it's not only, there are not only drone attacks going on, there is a lot of other human rights violations going on both by the Pakistani military and by the Taliban. So, but it's very difficult to report on them because there is no access to information. Also, people are afraid. So you can be very much easily anti-American, and you can bash the whole drone program, and just to deflect the attention from many other things which are going on in the tribal areas. Like the way the tribal areas are run under the frontier crimes regulation drawn by the British is against the fundamental human rights. But no human rights organization talk about those issues. They just talk about the drones, and the tribal people, they might not be agreeing with what the international community and the human rights workers say about their situation relating to the drone issue. So the thing in Pakistan, especially in the tribal, they are very complicated, and you have to know
but they're complicated. But if we could stay with the drone issue,
drone program.
I agree with you about the situation in the tribal areas, but Medea, but the drone issue is something that we can talk about, and we should talk about, and we should change. We may not be able to change what happens in the tribal areas of Pakistan, but we can change, or we should know more about American policy there, and we don't.
Well, we have to change U.S. policy because the drones are not just in the purview of the U.S. government agencies. The drones are being sold to over 70 countries around the world by American companies, Israeli companies, Chinese companies. And so if we allow the U.S. government to continue to use drones, violating the sovereignty of other nations, refusing to reveal to the American public and the international community what it's doing, why it's doing it, how it's doing it, we will be opening up the Pandora's box to a world of total chaos and lawlessness. So I think it's incumbent upon us to rein in the United States government and set a new precedent for the use of drones.
Morris, can you reflect upon that? Because I was going to get that in the second half of the program, but what is the strategic value of these drones here? I did say all it does is create blowback.
Well, you know, the drone itself, and I think this discussion sometimes gets sidetracked by focusing on the drone, the platform. And it's not the platform that's the problem, it's the policy for how they're used. I mean, the drone is just another weapon system, and it's an F-16 or an A-10 or an Apache helicopter with the pilot sitting in a lounge chair rather than the cockpit. So I'm not opposed to the platform of the drone. It's the policy for how it's used. And, you know, for years now, we've been the only game in town. And when you can, you know, make up your own rules.
The only game in town. On that note, we're going to go to a short break. And after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on drones. Stay with our team.
I love you.
Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing Washington's global drone policies. I'd like to go back to you, Morris, in Washington. You and Medea already mentioned something that I wanted to go into, and that is, let me give all three of you a hypothetical. Prince Bandar, we've been told, warned Russia that if it didn't change its position on Syria, that it could make things at the Sochi Olympic Games a bit uncomfortable in terms of terrorism. So, Morris, let me ask you this. Let's say with that kind of knowledge, Russia knows that the Sochi Games are going to be under threat by terrorists somewhere in the world, and Russia has drones. And maybe, because of self-defense, using exactly the same logic being applied in Washington today, Russia strikes, let's say, Saudi Arabia. So what do you think the world's response would be, and what would Washington's response be? Would it be just hypocritical, or would it say Russia is the aggressor?
Well, Washington has certainly not been hesitant to be hypocritical. I mean, there have been any number of practices in the post-9/11 era where we've condemned others for doing exactly what we have done. And again, that's my concern of the precedent that we're setting on the use of drones. So I think the solution, or what I would like to see happen, is there needs to be an international consensus. You know, we're applying the Geneva Conventions and the international humanitarian law that's largely a byproduct of World War II that didn't contemplate these kinds of weapons. And on the horizon, we've got autonomous weapons that'll make their own decisions. So I think we need to have an international discussion and come up with rules that we can all agree upon on how this kind of technology can be used.
Peter, what about that? Because, I mean, we have countries now developing, and Medea has already told us there's export of these weapons around the world. So far as I can tell, it's Israel, the UK, and the United States use them the most here. But in the next few years, they're going to proliferate immensely. And then we have absolute chaos, more violence than we already have right now. I mean, is Pakistan even prepared for something like that?
Yeah, I think Pakistan is also working on its own drone program. But as the professor said, the U.S. has, as it's a leader in the technology, it has to lead the way in drawing up international regime to control the use of drones. Otherwise, as you mentioned, the U.S. cannot continue with setting up these bad precedents in where they just take out people who they think are against their security. But again, as I mentioned, in Pakistan, things are different. The politics is different. So there, the problem is not the drone, the use of drones. It's the problem, and also the problem is the secret, the opaque nature of Pakistan-U.S. relationship. So there has to be more focus on that in order to make that relationship more transparent. And then, but you are right.
Peter,
the U.S. has to lead the way in.
All right, go ahead, Medea, jump in. Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say I don't think it's not going to be coming from the U.S. government, either from this administration or Congress. It really has to be from the American people who are starting to get educated about this issue and starting to organize and protest. And we're having a drone summit November 16th in Washington, D.C., hundreds of people coming from around the country and around the world to create a global network to change these policies. And I think that's where the solutions will come.
But Morris, I don't think it's going to, the U.S. government is going to have to take a lot of pressure, because I think, as we pointed out here, the way these weapons are used is just great for any kind of government that doesn't want to be held accountable whatsoever, because you say, well, it's not a war, so we're not, there's no international law that applies. I mean, this is the evilness, if I can use that word, of these weapons, because you avoid the law in every single possible way, and you don't have to be held accountable, and you don't have to demonstrate any goodwill on the people that you're attacking, because they're an imminent threat, whatever that means.
No, you're exactly right. And what this administration has done, and the last administration as well, is try to play both sides of the street. When it's convenient and we can apply the law of war and we categorize this as a war on terrorism, then we use the military and we operate under the law of war. But when that's an impediment, then we have this other program by the CIA that operates under no law that we use as well. So we played it both ways. And I think the example you gave about Russia and Saudi Arabia, I think to really bring it home to America would be if the Mexican government in their war on drugs came across our border and launched a drone strike in Arizona that killed some children there, because that would be the exact same scenario. And would we just say, well, that's the way things happen, or would we complain? And I expect the American people would be outraged if it happened here.
Medea, what do you think about that? Because I completely agree with Morris there. But again, the United States, it's very, it's exceptional. We are such a great, wonderful nation. We know how to use these weapons. We use them justly. I mean, these are like talking points coming out of the White House. That day and age is coming to an end very, very quickly.
Well, I think so. I think public opinion has changed dramatically here in the United States, and certainly around the world. It's been against the use of these drones. There's one point I wanted to make when Colonel Morris Davis said that it's not the platform, it's the policy. I agree, but your listeners should know, and your viewers, that the drones are special in that they can hover overhead for days and weeks at a time and terrorize entire villages. So it's not just who is killed and maimed. It's also a collective punishment, and we know in Yemen and in Pakistan, children who can't go to sleep at night, they're afraid to go to school. So recognize how this is terrorizing entire populations.
Peter, what more can the Pakistanis do? Because, again, as it's always pointed out, when you're dealing with Pakistan, we have the government and we have the military. I mean, is there going to be a resolution there? Because Pakistan could be a first good step in reining in this policy and reining in the Americans.
Yeah, but Pakistan, first of all, Pakistan needs to rein in the militants, and Pakistan has to eliminate the sanctuaries which are on the Pakistani tribal areas, sanctuaries of Al-Qaeda and Taliban. And as I mentioned, this is really complicated in the sense that now, as the Americans are leaving from Afghanistan, the focus will be on counter-terrorism instead of counter-insurgency. So the Americans will be leaving 10 to 15,000 forces. And for them, the drones will continue to be the weapons of choice because, again, the same politics will continue.
Yeah, but Pierre, don't you agree that it's been mentioned a number of times, every time a drone strike kills a family, a funeral, a wedding, it just generates more blowback. It's just the greatest recruiting element of Al-Qaeda and other groups like it. I mean, doesn't the logic of that stand, or is it understood in Pakistan? It just makes things worse.
Yes, I mean, this is, you are right in the sense that if you kill civilians, and by civilians I mean purely civilians, and as has happened in Rafiqur Rahman case, there is a blowback, and people have come out, people have protested, and now but as I said, in Pakistan, the problem is not drones, but the problem is with the narrative of the drones, which have been promoted all these years, in the absence of an American counter-argument. So as I mentioned in the very beginning, you have to take into the account the politics surrounding the drone issue in Pakistan. It's within Pakistan and between Pakistan and the US. And there has never been a genuine debate. And I am glad now that as the American acknowledged the program since last year, there is now some sort of discussion going on. And I think the more you discuss this issue, the more it will force Pakistan and the US to take corrective measure in order to avoid the civilian casualties and in order to be able to compensate those civilians who have lost their relatives.
Morris, you know, everything I've read about this policy from Bush to Obama tells me it's been institutionalized. They've tweaked it. They're really happy with it. Because in their mind, it's effective, it's cheap, no American boots on the ground, you know, no awful pictures of like what we saw with a Black Hawk Down, things like that. I mean, this is really kind of, quote unquote, convenient, isn't it? It's war on the cheap, and you can kill anybody you want in the world and get away with it. It's amazing.
No, you're exactly right. And that's what, for the American public, you know, when Americans come home in body bags, the American public gets upset. But when we can operate from the convenience of an air-conditioned room and a recliner with a joystick, then, you know, we're killing other people, which the administration, apparently if you're mature, mobile, and Muslim, then that counts as being a militant. So we've been pretty liberal in defining, you know, who we've conducted these strikes on. And, you know, you mentioned American exceptionalism, but we've used that as an American exception, where, you know, we demand others live up to a standard of accountability that we don't hold up to ourselves. And, you know, President Obama says we're a light unto the world, but for the last 10 years, we've been a warning light and not a guiding light.
Medea, you know, I know your activities with Code Pink, and I very much support it. How are you going to get the American people, to get the administration to say this is the wrong path? Because there's a lot, you know, like I mentioned before, you know, it's cheap, no American boots on the ground. This is something that people are thinking, we don't want big wars anymore. We don't want to invade these countries anymore. Syria is a case in point. But the drones is really the addiction there. We can get, quote-unquote, accomplish a lot without losing American lives.
I think that's what the administration thought, and that was true just even a year ago. But that has changed dramatically. The polls have showed a significant shift in the population's thinking about these drones. Americans have become war-wise and recognize that it's we didn't want to go to war in Syria. We want the diplomatic talks with Iran. And the American people don't want to see the U.S. creating new conflict, and that's what the drones are doing. There's now supposedly 40 different associated Al-Qaeda groups. The use of drones has not eliminated the threat. It's just moved it around. And I think we are getting the American people now to be aware of how this policy is not making us safer and actually jeopardizing our security. And that's already having an impact on the administration, which is reducing the number of drone strikes. We've got to get them to stop.
On that note, I want to thank all my guests in Washington and in New York. And I want to thank our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, CrossTalk rules.
I love you.